What's up techies? My name is Cam. I'm a former technical recruiter turned software engineer. So today I want to talk about how I approach getting my first job in code and what I would actually do differently if I could turn back time and I knew what I know now. We're going to cover the skills, both technical and non-technical, the mentality required, and also just some practical tips for managing an effective job search to make sure you get the best possible outcome. Before we start, this is a new channel, so I would really appreciate you following me on here, and as well do check out my TikTok and the podcast I co-host, which is called The Coder Career. Before we start, I want to talk about the mentality that I recommend you get into here. People don't think about how they're approaching their job search properly, and that's why I think people often struggle to get that first job in tech. This, in my view, as well as getting your first job, will empower you to get the best results possible out of your career in technology. It's actually super simple. You've got to stop thinking of yourself as an employee. Think of yourself as an independent business. You're running a one-person consultancy. As that one employee, the CEO, you've got to look at everything through a commercial lens. And in practical terms, what that means is how your skills, both the non-technical and technical skills, will impact the bottom line, assuming you work for a for-profit company. If you work in either the public sector or for a non-profit, think about how it can affect that organisation achieving their goals quicker with you rather than without you. Basically, what's the return of investment of a company hiring you? This mentality alone will separate you from how most other coders think, and it's how I recommend approaching most things in your life. And if you have stumbled across this and you're not a software engineer, that is a lesson I recommend you can take regardless of what you do. But let's start the journey to getting that first job in tech with step 1 of 4. Step 1 is working on your personal skills and how they're going to impact your career going forward. Now, this is probably no surprise to you because it's the main thing people think about when they're becoming a software engineer, and there's plenty of content out there, both from myself and my other channels, and from plenty of other people that are really great. I can recommend plenty of channels for you to check out for that. Obviously, this would be a whole channel, let alone a video in its own right. But my generic advice would be learn JavaScript, learn Python, to the point where you're able to make a project that's commercially useful. I call this a flagship project. What do I mean by commercially useful? I mean that either from a B2B or B2C perspective, someone would want to use that code base. So it could be a consumer iPhone app, or it could be a way for a small business to manage their expenses and track their receipts. It doesn't have to be perfect, but if you're able to create something like that, ideally full stack, it is really a good yardstick to be able to tell where you are on the market relative to your peers. And at that point, if you're able to do that, I would say you're job ready. And now it's on to step 2 of 4, and that is mapping the market. Here's what I mean by mapping the market. Think about your local market, be that your country's market if you're working remote, working from anywhere, or literally your city's market if you're going to be working in a office. So what companies use the tech stack that you're learning, and what companies have a history of hiring juniors? This is especially important if you're a career changer. I know a lot of people that follow my content are career changers because I'm one myself. I'm going to give you a little hack to find out who hires the juniors. All you need to do is do a LinkedIn search. I would advise searching for the alumni of popular coding bootcamps in your location, especially if it's one that you've gone to. Filter it by those who've learned the same tech stack as you. And for example, that might be, say, I don't know, if I search Java developers in London who went to a bootcamp. And then from there, I'm going to make a list of where those people work and what their job titles are. So I'd recommend keeping track of this in a spreadsheet or just whatever works for you. Just make sure you actually keep track of this so you're not doubling up on your work. Mark which ones have an active vacancy and then apply to them. That part is simple. For the ones that don't have an active vacancy, I want you to go and find the recruiter on LinkedIn. Generally, if they're an internal recruiter, their job title will be something like talent acquisition specialist or talent acquisition manager, and you can find them on LinkedIn. Drop them a message, explain what you like about the company, explain that you've seen they've got a track record for hiring juniors, and ask them if they're hiring right now. Remember, companies get an influx of applications for junior positions, so a lot of the time don't even bother to advertise them because they know they'll always have a steady supply of candidates. Now, the advantage to this is obvious because you've got a job application on the go, right? But it's such a good job application because chances are almost no one else is going to be in the running for it. When I used to put out a junior job application for software engineers, when I was a recruiter myself, I would get hundreds of CVs/resumes coming through the door. If you're able to get into something that's unadvertised, you have so much less competition, and therefore it's pretty simple to work out that you're far more likely to secure that role. And as we all know, getting the first job in tech is always the hardest. Step 3. Fantastic. You've got some job applications on the go. It's time to manage those interview processes and the leads that you've gathered. So at this step, I would recommend creating some kind of board view, similar to if you've used something like Jira before to track a project. You're essentially making a pipeline like a salesperson. So I'm going to show you an example of something I've made. So this is a very simple example of my job search template. So for people who are familiar, this is Notion. You can see here it's like a Kanban style board. You drag and drop cards across the screen. So it's basically chronological. You can see from here, from left, we go across from applied to phone interview to technical interview to offer to rejected as well. You can see here that I put rejected by them because it's important to track whether you rejected the company or they rejected you. So there are also some Easter eggs here for people that are fans of tech in TV shows. I've listed them all here, but you can see here that I've attached some notes about each company and, you know, the pros, potential cons. When it's relevant here, I've talked about money as well. What I could do here is if there were more offers on the table, I could balance out what I'm potentially going to get out of each offer and why I think that one offer is better than the other, and look at things objectively. It's very easy to get tied up in the emotion of a job search. You're meeting different people. It's sometimes quite difficult to get the clear facts, especially if you're new in your career and you're less used to the process of going through these things. So this is how I recommend you track your job searches. I can make this available as a template if people want to use it as well. It's pretty self-explanatory and simple, but it's amazing how few people actually use something like this. This is what I use every time I go and get a new job, and it has always served me well. So the main premise is you just want to make sure that, in fact, this is actually quite a bad example in the sense of you want to make sure that all your cards are batched as closely together in each column as possible. So we don't want to spread them out like this. We want to have multiple phone interviews going on at the same time, because then we want the funnel to move across and then we can end up with everything at offer at the right time. Otherwise, stuff slips through. Companies may be less likely to proceed if they find out you've got a final interview coming up. So always be honest about dates of when your interviews are and things like that, because companies will try and speed it up as well. So just try and get everything as in sync as possible. I would recommend having a day in mind you start your job search and really push for the first week or two to try and get as many things at the top of the funnel as possible, because then they should drop at the bottom of the funnel around the same time. And remember, the further you are into process, the more a company will be invested in trying to get you through the rest of the process, so they're more likely to fast track your application if you have other offers on the table. There's so many reasons to keep track of something like this. Again, may seem obvious to some people, but a lot of people don't use these. In terms of strategy for the number of interviews, I know it can be quite tiring and exhausting to go through so many processes, but I would recommend targeting 5 final stage interviews. That should mean you'll have 2 to 3 job offers to choose from, which means you're more likely to succeed at the next step. And now it's the final step. It's managing your offers. Great, we're in a fantastic position. We have some guaranteed offers of employment. In an ideal situation, we have multiple offers. You don't need to tell each company who the job offers are from, even if they ask. However, I really strongly would recommend telling them that the offers exist and the details of those offers in terms of the compensation packages. A lot of people will advise you, only ever say that, I only am interested in this company because you're so fantastic, XYZ. People are going to see right through that. I saw right through it as a recruiter. The reality of the situation is, strategically, you should be in multiple interview processes if you're looking at getting a new job. The reality of it is, companies are interested in employing you as a software engineer. They want to know what they're competing against. If they've given you an offer, they are clearly invested in you and they want to know what the price is to bring you on. Remember, we're thinking about this like we're running a small business. They want to know what the cost would be to acquire your small business, essentially. In general, it's just far better if everyone knows the facts. Information perfection is a key concept of ideal economics, and it works here. What I do want to warn you about, though, is lying. Do not lie about job offers. You might get away with it once, but it will come back to bite you. It's a smaller industry than you think, and I would never condone doing that. It's just never a clever game to play. Lies could catch up with you. Just don't do it. So if you followed the board view suggestion correctly, you will have already talked about the pros and cons of what each job offer has, and also it will tee you up for some really good questions to ask the recruitment team of each company. So you have all the pros and cons laid out and you can make an informed decision. I recommend coming up with some kind of scoring matrix based on a number of factors. You could even code it up. That could be a cool little project to do. It's up to you at this point, really. I can't give you specific advice because each person is different. Perhaps you want to prioritize work-life balance, perhaps you want to prioritize compensation, perhaps you want to prioritize remote work. There's a number of different factors and everyone's different, so I can't really give you advice here. That part's up to you. I really appreciate you checking out this video. I'm a new channel, but as I mentioned before, I do actually have some existing content. I have some videos on TikTok and I co-host a podcast as well. If you're interested in maximizing both your career satisfaction and earnings in the world of technology, then please do follow me on here and my other channels as well.